This is the airport experience for most of us. Big crowds in busy shared spaces. Then there's how the other half fly. Well, actually, just a select few. This is Qantas's invite-only Chairman's Lounge, the most exclusive airline club in the country.
Look, it has the a la carte food, alcohol any time of the day. When your flight is ready to leave, someone comes and tells you, you'll get an upgrade if you don't already have one. Ministers and others and their hangers-on get to enjoy quite a lovely experience.
Qantas's Chairman's Lounge and Virgin's equivalent Beyond Lounge are frequented by corporate bigwigs, high flyers, celebrities and politicians, the latter with a growing list of defectors, ethical objectors from across the political spectrum.
I have written to Qantas and said I will relinquish my Chairman's Lounge membership.
It just began to sit poorly with me.
Senator David Pocock's one of those who strongly objects.
We have both major parties very happy to sling mud at each other, but no one's actually willing to take on the root causes of this, which is a system of disclosures which is way too loose.
At a federal level, rules around receiving gifts are strict but vary depending on your role within government. The Prime Minister and all cabinet ministers must declare anything from private industry valued from $300, whereas bureaucrats, heads of agencies and departments, it's $100. Those lounge invitations, now the centre of a political ethics saga, have no designated value, considered complimentary.
There's no way Qantas and others would be providing this benefit, which costs an extraordinary amount of money. I think some people have valued it at $10,000 a year, if they weren't hopeful of getting some benefit in return.
Sean Johnson is a former Liberal advisor and lobbyist who runs Open Politics, aiming to expose conflicts of interests. He's advocating for a ban on politicians accepting gifts, hospitality and free travel, and says from experience, government disclosure rules aren't working.
There seems to be this view in both sides of politics that, disclosure is almost like holy water. You sort of sprinkle holy water on the gift you've received and that somehow removes the misconduct risk. To my mind, that risk still remains. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Politicians make the rules for themselves, and until we hold them to account and have more people in there who are pushing these things, I don't think we're going to see change.
Some say it's not just politicians who need to be closely scrutinised.
Just because you disclose it doesn't make the conflict of interest go away.
Chris Douglas is a former AFP investigator, now a consultant, who's been looking into Commonwealth regulators and agencies with links to Qantas and Virgin.
They are receiving a benefit free from an organisation such as Qantas or Virgin, as the case may be, which they have responsibility for regulating or monitoring. Each of these instances have come to light because of the executives involved have disclosed that they have received this gift.
According to their respective gift registries, some executives and some commissioners from the ACCC, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau and ASIC have accepted complimentary Qantas and or Virgin lounge memberships.
It brings into question whether they could have or did influence the outcome of an investigation or the outcome of a situation that favoured Qantas or Virgin. Now, I'm not saying they have done either in the past, but it raises that question.
Spokespeople for the ACCC, ATSB and ASIC told 730 they don't see memberships impacting their impartiality, investigations, duties or decisions.
I'd call upon the federal government to review the conflict of interest policy of all Commonwealth departments and agencies. Best off having a policy there that says they are not to accept any gifts from any entity that they are responsible for regulating either directly or indirectly.
When they know that they may have to make rulings that have something to do with Qantas, you have to ask about the real and perceived conflict of interest there.
As that story suggested, politicians in Australia may have reached peak perk. Meanwhile, today speculation is rife on the date of the next federal election. Our chief political correspondent, Laura Tingle, is here to discuss what's on the cards. Let's start with that election, Laura. We had the Prime Minister in Tasmania, in 2 seats in Tasmania, and some questions about the timing of the WA election. Where does it leave us?
Where it leaves us, Sarah, I think, is when you cut it all down, we're into sort of silly season on election timing. Everybody's an expert, more experts than sudden soccer experts at a Matilda match. So I think you'd have to say that it's now looking like it's going to be difficult for an election to be held really, really late in May, which has been suggested as late as they can go. The question becomes how it fits in with the WA election, and also whether the government decides to have a budget or not. Now, this has all been sort of hypercharged by the remarks of the West Australian Premier. West Australia is due to go to the polls on the 8th of March, so that becomes a bit awks for the federal government if it wants to have an election at the same time the WA state election is being held, and then there's questions about afterwards. Now, let's just keep in mind, as is always the case with these speculations, that the only person who really knows the answer to this question is the Prime Minister.
So actually the question there is, do you think he's made a decision yet or not?
No, I don't think he has. And his clear preference has always been to go late. But there are a couple of cut-offs that the government has to sort of come to. One of them is, will they bring Parliament back? Because it's due to come back for a couple of weeks in February. That's not actually that huge a cut-off. I think that's probably likely. But from the Australia Day cut-off, that's one date. But at some point in that following month, they will have to decide whether they are actually going to have a budget in late March. And so the question is there a value in them doing that? And there's a lot of arguments going on at the moment which says that no, there isn't.
And where does the Reserve Bank's next meeting fit into the calculation, meeting or meetings?
In the government's dreams, I think, Sarah, is the appropriate answer to that. There's a meeting in February and then another one in April. So depending on when you chose to have the election, you could potentially, if the Holy Spirit was with you, have 2 interest rate cuts before an election in sort of the middle of April. But you wouldn't want to be holding out for that. But certainly if the government decides to let the West Australians go to the polls and then almost immediately call their own election, there's the scope for them to enjoy an interest rate cut if it comes. But the downside of that, of course, is that they really need to hold on to those seats in WA, and West Australian voters might be quite grumpy about being pushed back to the polls for a second time.
Just briefly, there was some new data about the Greens and their unfavourability. What's behind those numbers, and are they reliable, do you think?
Look, I think there are a lot of indications, whether it's from the Queensland election, local council elections and things, that the Greens aren't really doing all that well. There's this perception that they may have gone too far on some issues. And certainly we saw in Newspoll yesterday that Labor's primary vote is sort of stabilising at the expense of the Greens. Now, obviously the coalition has been closing the gap, but the Greens, I think particularly that measure on HECS debt has really helped Labor sort of fend off the Greens to some extent, and so there's a big question mark about both the Greens and other minor parties and independents and how they're doing in the polls at the moment.
As that earlier story suggested, aviation isn't going away. Now, the government announced today that it will commit $80 million to keep Rex going through next year. I guess the question is affordable aviation going to be an election issue?
Well, it's pretty red hot out in the bush, obviously, and this amount of money is really designed to make sure that those services are delivered to the bush. I don't know, as cost of living issues go, whether it's really front of mind for people, but we saw some data today which showed there'd been a 13% increase in the cost of airfares post Rex pulling out of the market. So once again, there's a lot of focus on what exactly Qantas is doing and how it dominates the market. And I think it will just continue the cranky mood of people about the approach of Qantas, who, by the way, say that it's all due to one concert by Coldplay forcing up the prices.
Now to Queensland. The incoming government has announced it's going to have a look at the government's decision to fund Quantum, the company building a quantum computer. Was there proper scrutiny of the government's decision to commit those funds when it happened?
So this was support from both the federal and state governments towards this, as well as private equity. Now, when it was announced, they were saying that the contracts hadn't actually been signed off, though there's a question mark about exactly how much commitment the Queensland government is basically already in for and whether it can back right out. It's certainly been scrutinised. It was challenged at the time. FOI documents have shown that there was a fairly rigorous process involved, but the Audit Office, the National Audit Office, is certainly having a look at it as well, just to be on the sort of safe side. So,
but does that give meaning to what the Queensland Premier is saying about the need to look at the deal?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One of them is we do have a big presence in quantum stuff, and which predates this. This is one deal, and there's going to be a report out on the extent of that tomorrow. But this one, I think one of the reasons why people are a bit dubious about it is, while it looked like we were going to get this once-off U-Beauty massive quantum computer, the same company has been talking about building another one in the States, so the gloss has sort of come off it a bit. But I think it's being seen a bit as a bit of political play here, creating a bit of mischief and uncertainty by the Queensland government about this deal, which is seen as very much a federal government deal. But just given the nature of the sort of financial commitments, which go to convertible notes and all sorts of different financial arrangements, it's not clear to me yet exactly whether Queensland can just pull out if it decides to do so.
Laura, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah.